I sat across from Derek in his corner office, fluorescent lights humming overhead like angry wasps. The annual review meeting I had dreaded for weeks finally arrived on this cold Tuesday morning in March. Derek leaned back in his expensive leather chair, the kind that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and slid a crisp white document across his mahogany desk with the coldest smile I had ever seen. The words that came out of his mouth hit me like ice water poured down my spine. "We're cutting your salary in half. Take it or leave it." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but somehow I managed to keep my voice perfectly steady. "I understand completely. When exactly does this take effect?" His smirk widened into something almost predatory. "Immediately." I nodded with complete calm. Perfect timing. He had absolutely no idea what was coming next. Derek's expression shifted slightly, confusion flickering behind his cold gray eyes. He clearly expected tears begging, maybe even anger. Instead, I remained perfectly composed, my hands folded in my lap like I was discussing the weather forecast. What Derek couldn't possibly know was that 3 weeks earlier, my entire world had changed with a single LinkedIn message. It started on a rainy Thursday evening when I was working late again covering for Derek's poor planning on the Henderson account. My laptop chimed with a notification that would transform everything. Janet Williams, senior recruiter for Sterling Creative Group, had sent me a message that made my pulse quicken. "Camilla, we've been watching your innovative campaigns for Thompson & Associates. Your work on the Morrison Hotels project caught our entire executive team's attention. Would you be interested in exploring opportunities with Sterling?" Sterling Creative Group. They were Thompson's biggest competitor, the company everyone in our industry respected and envied. I stared at that message for 10 full minutes before responding. The secret meetings began the following week. Janet and I would meet at small coffee shops scattered around downtown Portland, carefully choosing locations where Thompson employees never ventured. She was a sharp woman in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair, and the kind of confident demeanor that comes from years of successful negotiations. During our first meeting at Grind Coffee House on Morrison Street, she spread out a portfolio of Sterling's recent campaigns. "Your Morrison Hotels strategy increased their bookings by 37% in 6 months, Janet said, stirring her Americano with deliberate precision. "Derek presented it to our industry conference last year and took full credit, but we know you were the creative force behind it." My stomach tightened. Derek had indeed presented my work at that conference, never mentioning my name once during his 40-minute presentation. I had watched from the audience, invisible and uncredited. "We've been tracking your career trajectory for 2 years, Camilla. The Riverside Shopping Center campaign that won the Regional Marketing Excellence Award, that was yours too. The social media strategy that saved the failing restaurant chain, also yours. We see talent when others overlook it." Over the next 2 weeks, we met 4 more times. Each conversation revealed more about Sterling's culture, their collaborative approach, their respect for individual contributors. They offered me a position as creative director with a salary that was double what I currently made at Thompson. Not just double what Derek was now cutting me to, but double my original salary. The negotiation process felt surreal. Jonathan Pierce, Sterling's CEO, personally called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was hiding in the supply closet to avoid Derek's latest micromanaging session. His voice was warm but professional. "Camilla, Janet tells me you're exactly what we need to lead our new client acquisition team. We're prepared to offer you $140,000 annually, plus performance bonuses, plus stock options. When could you start?" I nearly dropped my phone. $140,000. Derek was cutting me from $70,000 to $35,000, while Sterling wanted to pay me twice my original salary to do work I actually loved. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at Thompson. For 3 weeks, I continued working under Derek's increasingly demanding supervision, watching him steal credit for my ideas while secretly planning my escape. I carefully documented every campaign I had created, every client relationship I had built, every strategy that bore my fingerprints. Now sitting in Derek's office with his smug smile beaming down at me, I felt a calm satisfaction wash over my entire body. His perfect timing comment would prove more accurate than he could ever imagine. "So," Derek continued, clearly enjoying what he thought was my humiliation, "I assume you'll need some time to consider our generous offer." "Actually," I replied with a serene smile. I don't need any time at all. This timing really couldn't be better. Derek frowned the first crack in his confident exterior. He had no idea that in exactly 10 days I would be starting my new position at Sterling Creative Group, leading the very team that would soon be competing directly against his department. The next morning arrived crisp and clear, with spring sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Thompson's reception area. I had spent the entire night crafting my resignation letter, choosing each word with surgical precision. Derek's assistant, Linda, a kind woman in her 60s who had witnessed too many of his tantrums, smiled sympathetically as I approached his office door at exactly 9 o'clock. He's expecting the Henderson presentation, she whispered conspiratorially. You might want to deliver your news after coffee kicks in. I knocked twice and entered without waiting for permission. Derek sat behind his massive desk attacking a croissant with unnecessary violence while scrolling through emails on his phone. He barely glanced up when I placed my resignation letter directly in front of his keyboard. What's this? He mumbled through a mouthful of pastry. My formal resignation from Thompson & Associates effective in 2 weeks as required by company policy. Derek's jaw stopped moving. He set down his croissant and picked up the letter with fingers that trembled slightly. As his eyes scanned the professionally worded document, his face transformed through a fascinating spectrum of emotions: confusion, disbelief, panic, and finally, pure terror. You can't be serious. This is about yesterday's salary adjustment, isn't it? Look, maybe we were a bit hasty with those numbers. I remained standing, hands clasped behind my back, in a posture I had learned from watching Sterling's executives during our meetings. This decision was made before yesterday's conversation, Derek. I've accepted a position with another firm. Another firm? His voice cracked slightly. Which firm? Sterling Creative Group. I'll be joining their team as creative director. Derek's face drained of all color. Sterling wasn't just any competitor, they were the competitor. Losing an employee to Sterling was like watching your star player join the opposing team right before the championship game. Sterling, Camilla, let's discuss this rationally. What are they offering you? We can match any reasonable package. This was the moment I had been anticipating. They've offered me $140,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and equity participation. Derek's croissant hit the floor. He stared at me with the expression of someone who had just realized they were standing in quicksand. For the first time in the 4 years I had worked under him, Derek appeared genuinely speechless. 140, that's... He grabbed his calculator fingers, fumbling with the buttons. That's double what we pay you. Actually, it's 4 times what you offered me yesterday. Derek's phone started ringing, but he ignored it completely. He stood up, abruptly began pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. Okay. Let's fix this immediately. I'll reinstate your original salary right now. $70,000 plus, we'll add a $10,000 retention bonus. Thank you for the offer, but I've already committed to Sterling. $85,000 then plus the bonus. Derek, the decision is final. His pacing intensified. Sweat beads formed along his hairline, despite the office's aggressive air conditioning. $100,000. Final offer, plus your own office, plus 2 weeks additional vacation. I maintained my calm expression while internally marveling at Derek's panic. Yesterday he had slashed my salary in half with cruel satisfaction, but now he was offering me more than I had ever earned at Thompson. The irony was almost poetic. I appreciate your sudden recognition of my value, but Sterling is expecting me to start Monday after next. Derek's desk phone rang again. This time he snatched it up with obvious irritation. What I said, no interruptions during... His expression changed dramatically. Barbara wants to see me right now about what... Barbara Hayes was Thompson's senior partner, the woman who had built the company from a 2-person operation into a regional powerhouse. She rarely involved herself in departmental personnel decisions, which made her sudden interest highly unusual. Derek hung up the phone and looked at me with something approaching desperation. Don't do anything permanent until I return from this meeting. Promise me you'll wait. I nodded non-committally and watched Derek hurry from his office, his confident stride replaced by the uncertain gait of someone walking toward an execution. Through his glass walls, I could see other employees watching our interaction with curious expressions. Sarah Martinez from accounting caught my eye and raised her eyebrows questioningly. I simply smiled and returned to my desk to begin organizing my files. 20 minutes later, Derek returned with his tie askew and visible perspiration staining his shirt collar. He closed his office door and gestured frantically for me to join him. "Barbara wants to meet with you this afternoon," he announced, attempting to regain his authoritative tone. "She's very interested in discussing your future with the company. What exactly did you tell her about my resignation?" Derek's eyes darted around the room, avoiding direct contact with mine. "I may have mentioned that you were considering other opportunities, and she expressed concern about losing valuable talent." The truth was obviously more complicated than Derek's sanitized version, but I agreed to meet with Barbara at 3 o'clock. As I left Derek's office, I noticed him frantically dialing his phone, probably calling every contact he had to find out what Sterling was planning and how Thompson could respond. What Derek didn't know was that Barbara's meeting would reveal far more about his management failures than he could possibly imagine. Barbara Hayes' corner office occupied the entire northeast section of Thompson's top floor, with panoramic views of Portland's skyline stretching toward Mount Hood in the distance. She was a woman who commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation. Her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her navy suit impeccably tailored. When I arrived for our 3 o'clock meeting, she gestured toward the comfortable seating area rather than the formal conference table. "Camilla, thank you for making time to speak with me. Derek mentioned you're considering opportunities elsewhere." I settled into the leather chair across from her, noting how different this conversation felt compared to Derek's panic-driven negotiations. "I've accepted a position with Sterling Creative Group, Ms. Hayes. My last day will be 2 weeks from today." Barbara's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise mixed with concern. "Sterling is an excellent firm. May I ask what prompted this decision?" Before I could respond, there was a soft knock on the office door. Barbara's assistant entered with a tray of coffee and quietly withdrew. The brief interruption gave me time to choose my words carefully. I felt undervalued and underutilized in my current position. Yesterday's salary reduction confirmed that it was time to explore other options. "Salary reduction?" Barbara's eyebrows rose slightly. "I wasn't aware of any departmental salary adjustments." This was clearly news to her, which explained Derek's nervous behavior earlier. I suspected he had made the salary cut decision independently, possibly hoping to keep the savings for his own budget bonus. Derek informed me yesterday that my salary was being cut from $70,000 to $35,000 annually, effective immediately. Barbara set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. "That's quite a significant reduction. What reason did he provide for this decision?" "He said it was a company-wide cost-cutting measure and that I should take it or leave it." Barbara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There have been no company-wide salary reductions authorized by senior management, Camilla. Derek appears to have acted without proper approval." At that moment, her office door opened, and Sarah Martinez appeared in the doorway looking apologetic but determined. "Ms. Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Linda said you might want to know that several employees have been asking questions about salary adjustments." Barbara gestured for Sarah to enter. "What kind of questions?" Sarah glanced nervously at me, then back to Barbara. "Well, Derek cut my quarterly bonus last month without explanation. When I asked why, he said it was due to my performance, but my client satisfaction scores are actually higher than they've ever been." "How much was your bonus reduced?" "From $3,000 to $500. I watched Barbara's expression grow increasingly serious. This was clearly the first she was hearing about Derek's unauthorized financial decisions. "Sarah, would you mind asking Tyler Brooks from IT to join us? And please ask Linda to locate Derek's departmental budget reports for the past 6 months." As Sarah hurried away, Barbara turned back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Camilla, I'm beginning to suspect that your situation is part of a larger problem. Would you be willing to postpone your conversation with Sterling until we can investigate what's been happening in Derek's department? I'm committed to starting at Sterling, Ms. Hayes, but I'm happy to help with any investigation that might benefit my colleagues." 10 minutes later, Tyler Brooks knocked and entered with his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Tyler was a quiet man in his late 20s who managed Thompson's IT infrastructure with remarkable skill and minimal fanfare. His brown hair was perpetually disheveled, and his thick-rimmed glasses gave him the appearance of someone who spent most of his time solving complex technical problems. "Tyler," Barbara began, "I need you to help us understand some discrepancies in departmental salary and bonus payments. Can you access Derek's budget allocations for the past year?" Tyler opened his laptop and connected to the company's financial systems. His fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. After several minutes of concentrated typing, his expression grew troubled. "Ms. Hayes, there are some unusual patterns in Derek's departmental spending. Would you like me to print a detailed report? Please do. And Tyler, I want you to flag any transactions that seem outside normal operational parameters." As Tyler's printer hummed to life, Sarah returned with Lisa Thompson, a junior account executive who looked visibly nervous about being summoned to the senior partner's office. "Lisa," Barbara said gently, "Sarah mentioned you might have some concerns about recent departmental decisions. Please sit down and tell me what's been happening." Lisa perched on the edge of her chair, fidgeting with a pen. "Derek passed me over for the promotion to senior account executive last month. He said I wasn't ready for additional responsibilities, but I've been managing the Peterson account independently for 8 months, and they specifically requested that I continue as their primary contact." Who received the promotion instead? His nephew Brad, who just graduated from college and has been with the company for 6 weeks. Barbara made a note on her legal pad. The picture emerging was one of systematic mismanagement and possible nepotism, far worse than a simple salary dispute. Tyler handed Barbara a stack of printed reports. As she scanned the pages, her expression grew increasingly stern. "These numbers don't make sense. Derek's budget shows salary savings of nearly $100,000 this year, but there's no record of where that money was reallocated." "What does that mean?" I asked. Tyler adjusted his glasses and pointed to specific lines on the report. "It means Derek has been cutting salaries and bonuses, but reporting the original amounts to senior management. The difference between what he's actually paying and what he's reporting has disappeared into unaccounted expenses." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Derek wasn't just making poor management decisions. He was potentially embezzling company funds. Barbara stood up and walked to her window, gazing out at the city skyline. "Tyler, I want you to conduct a complete audit of Derek's financial transactions for the past 2 years. Include all salary adjustments, bonus payments, vendor contracts, and expense reports. Can you have preliminary findings ready by tomorrow morning?" "Absolutely, Ms. Hayes." Sarah Lisa, I want you to document every interaction you've had with Derek regarding salary bonuses or promotions. Include dates, witnesses, and any written communications. And please ask other employees in the department if they've experienced similar issues. As the meeting concluded, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. My decision to leave Thompson was clearly the right choice, but discovering the extent of Derek's misconduct felt like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. Barbara walked me to the door. "Camilla, I hope you understand that if we had known about these issues earlier, things would have been very different." "I understand, Ms. Hayes, but honestly, I'm excited about the opportunities waiting for me at Sterling." What none of us realized was that Derek's problems were about to get exponentially worse, and my perfect timing comment would prove even more prophetic than I had imagined. The following morning brought unseasonably warm weather to Portland, with temperatures climbing towards 75 degrees by 10 o'clock. I arrived at Thompson early to begin organizing my files and preparing for the transition to Sterling. The office buzzed with unusual energy, whispered conversations clustering around coffee stations and copy machines. Tyler had clearly been working through the night. His desk was covered with printed reports, empty coffee cups, and the scattered remnants of what appeared to be several energy bar wrappers. When I approached his workspace, he looked up with bloodshot eyes and an expression of grim determination. "Camilla, you're not going to believe what I've found." He gestured toward his computer screen, which displayed a complex spreadsheet filled with highlighted transactions. Derek hasn't just been cutting salaries, he's been systematically stealing from client accounts. My stomach dropped. "Stealing how?" Tyler pulled up another screen showing vendor invoices. "He's been creating fake vendor accounts for services that were never provided. Look at this one. Morrison Consulting Services billed $15,000 for strategic planning consultation on the Henderson account. What's wrong with that? Morrison Consulting Services doesn't exist. I traced the payment to a bank account registered under Derek's wife's maiden name. The evidence was devastating." Tyler walked me through a pattern of fraud spanning 18 months. Derek had inflated project costs, created fictional subcontractors, and diverted payments to personal accounts. The total amount exceeded $200,000. Does Barbara know about this? I sent her a preliminary report an hour ago. She's meeting with the company's legal counsel this morning. At that moment, Maria Rodriguez arrived at Tyler's desk. Maria was Thompson's newly hired forensic accountant, a sharp woman in her 40s with an impressive background investigating corporate fraud. Barbara had called her at 7 in the morning and asked her to begin an emergency audit. "Tyler, I need you to walk me through your findings step by step," Maria said, settling into a chair beside his desk. "And I need copies of every document, every transaction record, every piece of evidence you've uncovered." As Tyler began his detailed presentation, I noticed Derek's office door was closed with the blinds drawn. Linda, his assistant, looked unusually tense as she fielded phone calls and rescheduled appointments. "Where is Derek this morning?" I asked Linda during a brief lull in her phone activity. "He called in sick," she replied quietly. "But between you and me, he sounded more panicked than ill." Around 11 o'clock, Barbara emerged from her office, accompanied by Harrison Davis Thompson's corporate attorney. Harrison was a tall, distinguished man with graying temples and the kind of serious demeanor that suggested significant legal experience. They headed directly toward Tyler's workstation. "Tyler," Barbara said, "please show Mr. Davis what you've discovered." Harrison listened intently as Tyler explained the fraudulent transactions, occasionally asking pointed questions about documentation and evidence verification. His expression grew increasingly grave as the presentation continued. "This constitutes federal wire fraud," Harrison concluded after reviewing the evidence. "We're obligated to report these findings to law enforcement." "What about Derek?" I asked. "Derek needs to be terminated immediately," Barbara replied. "But first, we need to secure all evidence and prevent him from destroying anything that might be relevant to the investigation." At that moment, Sarah Martinez approached our group with a concerned expression. "Ms. Hayes, I think you should know that Derek just called me at home. He wanted to know if anyone had been asking questions about departmental finances." Barbara and Harrison exchanged meaningful glances. "What exactly did he say?" Harrison asked. "He said there might be some accounting irregularities that could be misinterpreted, and that I should be careful about spreading rumors that could damage the company's reputation." "That sounds like witness intimidation," Harrison observed grimly. Tyler's computer chimed with an incoming email notification. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "Derek just remotely accessed the company server. He's trying to delete files from his directory. Can you stop him?" "Already done. I changed all administrative passwords this morning and created backup copies of everything. But this shows clear consciousness of guilt." Harrison pulled out his phone and stepped away to make a private call. When he returned, his expression was even more serious than before. "I've spoken with the district attorney's office. They're sending investigators this afternoon to collect evidence and conduct interviews." The investigation was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. What started as a simple salary dispute had uncovered a complex criminal scheme that threatened the entire company's reputation. Around noon, Lisa Thompson approached me with a manila folder clutched against her chest. "Camilla, I found something in my desk that I think you should see." She opened the folder to reveal a printed email chain between Derek and someone named Brad Morrison, who appeared to be Derek's nephew. The emails discussed which employees were expendable and how to restructure departmental costs to maximize available resources. "He was planning to fire half the department," Lisa said quietly, "including you, Sarah, and Tyler. He wanted to replace everyone with recent graduates who would work for entry-level salaries." The scope of Derek's deception was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing money. He was systematically destroying the careers of experienced employees to cover his tracks and increase his personal profit. As the day progressed, more employees came forward with stories of Derek's misconduct. The pattern was clear. Derek had been using his authority to exploit anyone he perceived as vulnerable while enriching himself through increasingly bold criminal schemes. By 5 o'clock, Tyler had documented over $300,000 in fraudulent transactions. Barbara had terminated Derek via email and phone call effective immediately. Building security had been instructed to prevent Derek from entering the premises. What we didn't know was that Derek was planning one final desperate gambit that would backfire in the most spectacular way possible. Thursday morning arrived with storm clouds gathering over Portland, the kind of spring weather that promised dramatic rainfall by afternoon. I was at my desk by 8 o'clock helping Tyler document the final pieces of evidence for the investigators who were scheduled to arrive at 10. The office atmosphere was tense but purposeful, like a hospital emergency room where everyone understood the gravity of the situation. At 8:30, Derek's sedan pulled into the parking garage. Linda immediately called security, but Derek used his keycard to access the building through the employee entrance before guards could intercept him. He burst through the main office doors with the wild-eyed expression of someone who had spent the night planning desperate measures. "Nobody move!" Derek shouted, drawing confused stares from early arriving employees. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding, and I need to address it before lies destroy this company." Barbara emerged from her office, flanked by 2 security guards who had finally caught up with Derek. "You're no longer an employee of this company. You need to leave immediately." "Not until I clear my name," Derek replied, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Camilla has been embezzling money from client accounts and trying to frame me for her crimes." The accusation hit the office like a thunderbolt. Several employees gasped audibly. Derek pointed directly at me with a trembling finger. "Check her computer. Check her desk. She's been stealing from the Henderson account for months, and when I discovered her scheme, she decided to quit and pin everything on me." Tyler stood up from his workstation, his laptop computer open in his hands. "Derek, I think there's something you should know about our security system." Derek's wild expression shifted toward confusion. "What are you talking about? Our phone system has been digitally recording all internal calls for the past 6 months as part of our new compliance protocols. Every conversation you've had in your office has been automatically archived." The color drained from Derek's face as Tyler continued his explanation. "Yesterday, when you called Sarah to intimidate her, that call was recorded. This morning, when you called your wife to discuss transferring money from the Morrison Consulting account, that call was also recorded." Harrison Davis stepped forward from where he had been observing the confrontation near the conference room. "Derek, before you say anything else, I strongly advise you to contact an attorney." But Derek was beyond listening to legal advice. His desperation had transformed into full panic mode. "Tyler, you're lying. There's no automatic recording system." Tyler turned his laptop screen so everyone could see the audio playback software. "Would you like to hear yesterday's conversation, where you admitted to creating fake vendor accounts? Or maybe this morning's call where you discussed planting falsified documents in Camilla's computer?" The office fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of morning traffic. Derek's entire body was visibly shaking now. "You set me up," he whispered, staring at Tyler with dawning comprehension. "Actually," Tyler replied calmly, "you set yourself up. I just documented everything you did." Barbara gestured toward the security guards. "Please escort Mr. Williams from the building. He's not permitted to return for any reason." As the guards moved toward Derek, he made one final desperate play. "Wait, I can prove Camilla has been stealing. I planted evidence in her old computer that shows wire transfers to her personal account." Harrison Davis pulled out a digital recorder and held it toward Derek. "Can you repeat that statement, please?" Derek's eyes went wide as he realized what he had just admitted. I didn't mean... That came out wrong. You just confessed to planting false evidence to frame a colleague for crimes you committed," Harrison said matter-of-factly. "That's obstruction of justice in addition to the fraud charges you already face." Tyler closed his laptop and looked directly at Derek. "For what it's worth, I saw you accessing Camilla's computer remotely yesterday afternoon. I have digital logs of every file you modified or created. Your planted evidence actually provides additional proof of your criminal intent." Derek's legs seemed to give out. He collapsed into a nearby chair, his head falling into his hands. "This wasn't supposed to happen this way. I was just trying to improve department efficiency." "By stealing $300,000 from client accounts?" Barbara asked incredulously. The security guards helped Derek to his feet and guided him toward the exit. As they passed my desk, Derek looked at me with an expression of absolute defeat. "I'm sorry, Camilla. You didn't deserve any of this." It was the first genuine thing Derek had said in my presence for as long as I could remember. After Derek was removed from the building, Tyler walked over to my desk with his laptop. "Want to hear something interesting?" Sterling Creative Group called this morning. They heard about our situation through industry contacts and wanted to discuss an acquisition proposal. I stared at him in shock. "An acquisition?" Apparently, they've been considering expanding their Portland operations, and losing Derek actually makes Thompson more attractive as a potential acquisition target. Barbara approached us with a thoughtful expression. "Camilla, I know you're committed to starting at Sterling, but what would you think about becoming our liaison for any acquisition discussions?" As I looked around the office at my colleagues who were finally free from Derek's toxic management, I realized that my perfect timing comment was about to become even more accurate than I had ever imagined. 6 weeks later, I stood in what had once been Derek's corner office, now transformed into my temporary workspace as Director of Strategic Integration for the Thompson-Sterling merger. The mahogany desk remained the same, but everything else reflected a completely different energy. Where Derek had displayed his ego-boosting awards and photographs, I had hung whiteboards covered with collaboration timelines and team development plans. The acquisition process had moved with remarkable speed once Sterling's executives understood the scope of the cleanup required. Jonathan Pierce Sterling's CEO flew to Portland personally to oversee the transition. He was a thoughtful man in his mid-50s, whose leadership style contrasted dramatically with Derek's authoritarian approach. "Camilla," Jonathan said during our morning meeting, "your handling of this crisis situation demonstrated exactly the kind of ethical leadership we value at Sterling. We want you to oversee the cultural integration of both teams." The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek's attempt to cut my salary in half had ultimately led to a position that paid more than twice his former salary and carried far more responsibility than I had ever imagined possible. Sarah Martinez knocked on my office door carrying a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the kind of smile that had become common around Thompson since Derek's departure. "The Portland Business Journal wants to interview you about the merger. They're calling it one of the year's most successful crisis-to-opportunity transformations." Sarah had been promoted to Financial Operations Manager, a role that utilized her analytical skills while ensuring the kind of financial oversight that might have prevented Derek's schemes in the first place. She had blossomed in the new environment, contributing ideas and insights that had been suppressed under Derek's micromanagement. "Any word on Derek's legal situation?" I asked. "Harrison spoke with the prosecutor's office yesterday. Derek is pleading guilty to wire fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. He's looking at 18 months in federal prison, plus restitution payments that will take him years to complete." Lisa Thompson appeared in my doorway, tablet in hand, and radiating the confidence that came with her new position as Senior Client Relations Specialist. The Henderson account just signed a 3-year contract extension. They said they're excited to work with a company that prioritizes integrity and employee development. Lisa had been Derek's biggest missed opportunity. Her natural talent for client relations combined with her genuine care for customer satisfaction made her invaluable in the post-merger environment. Sterling's collaborative culture had allowed her skills to flourish in ways that Derek's competitive atmosphere never permitted. Tyler Brooks emerged from the elevator carrying his ever-present laptop bag, but now he wore the confident demeanor of someone whose technical skills were properly valued. His promotion to Chief Information Security Officer came with a significant salary increase and the authority to implement the kind of systematic safeguards that could prevent future fraud. "The new security protocols are fully operational," Tyler announced, settling into one of my office chairs. "Every financial transaction requires dual authorization. All communications are logged and encrypted, and we've implemented real-time monitoring for unusual account activity." "How are the Sterling employees adjusting to the new oversight procedures?" I asked. "They love it. Turns out transparent processes make everyone's job easier when you're not trying to hide criminal activity." Barbara Hayes joined our impromptu team meeting carrying a folder filled with the kind of positive news that had become routine since the merger announcement. As Thompson's former senior partner and now Sterling Portland's regional managing director, she had embraced the opportunity to rebuild the company culture from the ground up. "I just got off the phone with 3 former clients who want to return now that Derek is gone," Barbara reported. The Morrison Hotels Group specifically said they were excited to work with Camilla again. The Morrison Hotels account was particularly meaningful to me. Derek had mismanaged their relationship so badly that they had terminated their contract 6 months earlier. Their willingness to return represented more than just restored business. It validated the collaborative approach that Sterling encouraged. Around noon, Janet Williams from Sterling's original Portland office arrived for our weekly integration meeting. She had become not just a recruiter who changed my life, but a mentor who helped me navigate the complexities of leading a major corporate transition. "I have some interesting news," Janet announced as she settled into our conference area. "Derek applied for a marketing position with Reynolds Associates last week." Tyler nearly choked on his coffee. "Someone actually considered hiring him. The application was automatically rejected when their background check revealed his pending criminal charges." But here's the fascinating part. Derek listed his Thompson experience as successfully managing a department that achieved 30% cost savings through strategic restructuring. We all stared at Janet in amazement. Even facing prison time, Derek couldn't acknowledge the reality of his actions. He also listed all of Camilla's award-winning campaigns as his personal achievements and claimed credit for the successful merger with Sterling. Barbara shook her head in disbelief. Some people never learn. As our meeting concluded, I walked to my window and gazed out at Portland's skyline. The spring weather had given way to summer sunshine, and the city looked vibrant and full of possibility. 6 months ago, I had been an undervalued employee working for an abusive boss who stole credit for my ideas. Today, I was leading a team of talented professionals who respected each other's contributions and worked toward shared goals. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jonathan Pierce. Board meeting went perfectly. Sterling Portland exceeded integration targets by 20%. Congratulations on building something remarkable. The transformation hadn't been easy. Merging two company cultures required countless hours of meetings, negotiations, and careful relationship building. But seeing Sarah Lisa Tyler and the entire team thrive in an environment that valued their contributions made every challenge worthwhile. As I prepared to leave for the day, Linda approached my office with an envelope marked personal and confidential. She had decided to stay on as the office's executive assistant, bringing her decades of experience to support the new leadership structure. "This came for you this afternoon," Linda said with a curious expression. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter on plain notebook paper. The return address showed Derek's name, but the letter came from the county jail where he was being held pending sentencing. The letter was brief but surprisingly honest. "Camilla, I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that losing everything has finally helped me understand what I became. You deserved better leadership than I provided, and I'm genuinely happy that you found success with Sterling. My actions were inexcusable, but they inadvertently led to positive changes for everyone at Thompson. I hope that counts for something. Good luck with the merger." I read the letter twice, feeling an unexpected mixture of sadness and closure. Derek's downfall hadn't brought me satisfaction, but his acknowledgement of responsibility suggested that prison might offer him the self-reflection he desperately needed. Tyler appeared in my doorway with his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "Ready for tomorrow's big presentation to the Sterling board." The merger would be officially completed in 2 weeks, creating one of the Pacific Northwest's most respected marketing firms. My role as Director of Strategic Integration would evolve into Vice President of Regional Operations, overseeing offices in Portland, Seattle, and eventually San Francisco. "I think we're going to do great," I replied, gathering my files and preparing to head home. As I walked through the office, I saw employees working collaboratively on projects, sharing ideas openly, and supporting each other's success. The toxic culture that Derek had created was completely gone, replaced by an environment where people could thrive professionally and personally. The transformation had taken months of careful work, but it proved that positive change was possible when people were willing to stand up for what was right and work together toward common goals. 1 year later, I sat in my spacious office on the top floor of Sterling Portland's newly renovated headquarters building, watching the sunset over the Cascade Mountains in the distance. The view was spectacular, but what filled me with the deepest satisfaction was the sound of collaborative energy humming throughout the office below. The merger had exceeded everyone's expectations. Sterling Portland had become the fastest-growing marketing firm in the Pacific Northwest with client satisfaction scores that topped industry benchmarks. More importantly, we had created a workplace culture that attracted talented professionals who wanted to do their best work in an environment built on mutual respect and shared success. Sarah Martinez knocked on my door carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a smile that could have powered half of downtown Portland. "The final quarterly numbers are in, and I thought you might want to celebrate." Sarah had been promoted again, this time to Regional Financial Director, overseeing budget operations for all 3 Sterling offices. Her analytical skills and commitment to transparent financial practices had become legendary throughout the company. "How good are the numbers?" I asked. "We exceeded revenue targets by 42%. Client retention is at 97%, and employee satisfaction scores are the highest in company history." Lisa Thompson arrived moments later, followed by Tyler Brooks, Barbara Hayes, and several other team members who had become not just colleagues, but genuine friends during our shared journey from crisis to triumph. "I brought the latest client feedback reports," Lisa announced, spreading several manila folders across my conference table. "Henderson Hotels wants to expand their contract to include their new resort properties in Hawaii. Morrison wants us to handle their entire West Coast marketing strategy. And we just got a call from Reynolds Associates asking if we would consider acquiring their struggling Portland office. Tyler opened his laptop and connected it to my wall-mounted monitor. I've been tracking our progress against industry averages, and the results are pretty remarkable. The charts he displayed told a story of sustained growth built on ethical leadership and employee empowerment. Our client acquisition rate was 30% higher than industry standards. Our employee turnover was 60% lower, and our project success metrics topped regional rankings in every category. There's something else, Tyler continued with a mischievous grin. Derek got out of prison last month and applied for unemployment benefits. The state employment office called us to verify his work history. Barbara raised an eyebrow. What did we tell them? Exactly what his personnel file documented. Terminated for cause due to criminal misconduct. His benefits application was denied. I felt a complex mixture of emotions about Derek's continued struggles. His criminal actions had caused real harm to employees and clients, but his downfall had also created opportunities for positive transformation that changed all of our lives for the better. Janet Williams, who had become Sterling's regional managing partner, arrived with a bottle of wine and an envelope marked confidential. I have news that I think you'll find interesting, Janet announced, settling into one of the comfortable chairs around my conference table. Derek applied for a position with our Seattle office last week. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Please tell me you're joking, Sarah said. I wish I were. He submitted a resume claiming he had successfully led the Thompson-Sterling merger and that he was responsible for the cultural transformation that made the integration so successful. Tyler shook his head in amazement. Does he actually believe his own stories at this point? The application was rejected immediately, but it shows that Derek still doesn't understand the consequences of his actions or the positive changes that happened after his departure. Barbara opened the wine, while I reflected on how dramatically all of our lives had changed since that cold Tuesday morning when Derek attempted to cut my salary in half. His cruel decision had forced me to recognize my own value and take action to find a better situation. What I couldn't have predicted was that my individual decision would create opportunities for an entire team of talented people to thrive. I have an announcement to make, I said, raising my glass toward my colleagues and friends. Jonathan Pierce called this afternoon with news about next year's expansion plans. Everyone leaned forward expectantly. Sterling is opening offices in Denver and Austin, and they want us to lead the expansion process. Sarah, Lisa, and Tyler, they specifically requested that you be part of the team that establishes the new locations. The excitement around the table was infectious. These were opportunities that none of us could have imagined when we were trapped under Derek's toxic management. Now we were being recognized as leaders capable of building successful organizations from the ground up. As we toasted our collective success, I thought about the letter I had received from Derek 6 months earlier. He was working as a night security guard at a warehouse complex, earning minimum wage and slowly paying restitution to Thompson's clients. His final paragraph had stayed with me. I finally understand that success built on other people's suffering never lasts. You and the team are succeeding because you deserve it, not because you took it from someone else. I hope someday I can build something positive instead of just tearing things down. The letter suggested that prison had provided Derek with the self-reflection he needed to understand the impact of his choices. While I couldn't forgive the harm he had caused, I hoped he could eventually build a life based on the values he had finally learned to appreciate. Tyler raised his glass toward the window where the lights of Portland twinkled in the gathering darkness. Here's to perfect timing. Everyone laughed, remembering my response to Derek's salary cut announcement. That phrase had become something of a company motto, representing our shared belief that setbacks often create opportunities for those willing to recognize them. As the evening wound down and my colleagues headed home to their families, I remained in my office for a few extra minutes, reviewing the plans for next year's expansion and thinking about the lessons learned during our remarkable journey. Derek's attempt to diminish my value had forced me to seek recognition elsewhere, which led to opportunities I never would have pursued otherwise. His criminal behavior had exposed the toxic culture at Thompson, creating space for positive transformation that benefited everyone. His downfall had opened pathways for Sarah, Lisa, Tyler, and others to demonstrate capabilities that had been suppressed under his authoritarian leadership. The most important lesson wasn't about standing up to workplace bullies or recognizing your own worth, although both of those elements were crucial. The deepest truth was that individual actions create ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate circumstances. My decision to leave Thomson hadn't just changed my career. It had transformed the lives of colleagues who deserved better opportunities and created a workplace culture that attracted talented people who wanted to do meaningful work. As I prepared to leave for the evening, I thought about Derek working his night security shift across town. I hoped he was learning that true satisfaction came from building others up, rather than tearing them down, from creating value, rather than stealing it, from earning respect, rather than demanding it through intimidation. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean seeking revenge or celebrating someone else's downfall. It means recognizing your own worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve. Sometimes that individual courage creates space for positive change that extends far beyond your own situation, touching the lives of people who need someone to show them that better alternatives are possible. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jonathan Pierce. "Congratulations on an exceptional year. The board is unanimous in their decision to promote you to Regional Vice President. Welcome to Sterling's executive team." I smiled and gathered my things, ready to head home with the deep satisfaction that comes from work well done and opportunities well earned. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new possibilities, but tonight I felt grateful for the unexpected journey that had led from Derek's cruelty to this moment of peaceful accomplishment. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that ever happens. Not because suffering is good, but because adversity can reveal strengths you didn't know you possessed and create opportunities you never would have pursued otherwise. The key is recognizing that your worth doesn't depend on other people's ability to see it, and that standing up for yourself with grace and integrity can create positive changes that extend far beyond your own circumstances. Derek's attempt to cut my salary in half had forced me to recognize my true value. His criminal behavior had exposed the need for ethical leadership that created opportunities for an entire team. His downfall had opened space for the kind of collaborative culture where talented people could thrive. Perfect timing indeed. Before I leave you tonight, I want to ask you something. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone tried to make you accept less than you deserved? How did you respond? Did you stand up for yourself, or did you accept treatment that diminished your value? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might inspire someone else who's facing a similar challenge right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others discover it. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations and creating positive change through individual courage. And share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's inability to recognize it. Thank you for joining me on this journey from workplace injustice to professional fulfillment. Remember that sometimes the perfect timing isn't about when things happen to you, but about how you choose to respond when they do. Until next time, keep recognizing your own worth and never settle for less than you deserve.